Hi, guys. This week we will be moving into chapter 8, and the guiding question for this chapter is to what extent did historical globalization change people's lives? Now, we have been talking about globalization throughout the course, but what we are doing now is we're going back in time and talking about the historical component and the impact that it had on the people back then, and it continues to have today. Now, this PowerPoint, this tutorial is just a summary of the main components of the chapter, but you are welcome to read the entire chapter if you need further clarification or if something is, if you are interested in going into more detail. Okay, so what do you do when you want something? Okay. As humans, we typically, when we want something, we will usually try to find a way to get it. Now, believe it or not, at one point, Europeans thought that oranges were a delicacy and would pay high money to get this fruit. And the reason why is because it took a long time. It took a lot of time and effort to transfer oranges from Southern Europe to Northern Europe. And so humans had to use horses and donkeys and camels to transport these delicious treats. This want of things that could not attain within their immediate environment is what triggered international trade, which is the exchange of materials, goods, and services among distant groups of people. Okay, so if you think about it, when you go to the fridge and you grab an orange or you grab an apple, when you look at the sticker, if you look at the sticker, it will not say Calgary because we don't have um, the climate here to grow oranges, and so they are imported from the States, from other parts of Canada, South America. Okay, and so people wanted these oranges, people wanted all these goods, and despite the long months of travel that are required to get them, um, people still wanted things and they could not grow or make on their own environment. And so, as I mentioned, this sparked the international trade. One example of international trade is the Silk Road. Okay? So back in the day, Chinese Emperor Wu Di wanted powerful war horses from Iran. Okay, they didn't have any. So he sent a group led by Zhang Jian to find some in Central Asia. However, the route towards or the trail to get there was very dangerous. It was very violent. And so the mission failed. However, Zhang did find what is known to be the Silk Road instead. And the Silk Road was a network of trading between the Mediterranean and China. So China was able to make silk. They had the skills to do so, they had the resources where other people didn't, and they wanted silk. And so it allowed for this trading to happen as people wanted the silk, and they would pay very high prices for it because they didn't have the skills or the resources to make it on their own. Here is the map of the Silk Road, where it began here in China. And I am not going to go into too much detail with this because on D2L, I have placed a video that goes into more depth on the Silk Road, and I encourage you to watch it as it will give you very rich information, and it will also help you out with the assignment for this week. Now, in this chapter, you're going to come across the term mercantilism, and this is a term that you will need to know for the course and later on in Social 20 and 30. Okay. Mercantilism is a Eurocentric economic policy whereby European monarchs increase their wealth through international trade. Now, a monarch is a type of government where the king is the ruler, and what he says goes. He has the final say. He can make the laws, and people cannot question. They have to follow. Okay? European monarchs sponsor colonies, which provided natural resources. Okay? European monarchs believed that their level of gold, silver, and jewels in their treasury reflected their prestige. And so the more resources they had, the more prestige they had. And the more prestige they had, the more power, the more powerful they became. So mercantilism, monarchs and governments had the right to control trade for their own benefit. Monarchs would sponsor some trading ventures with their own money. So they would fund companies to go to the colonies and do some trading, get the resources so that they could come back and give it to the monarchs so that they would continue to build their wealth. Okay? They offer these colonies a monopoly, which is the right to gather and trade a specific good over anyone else. So they were the only ones who were allowed to trade with these resources over anyone else. And here's the model. So we have the monarch right at the top, and they would grant the money, they would fund and grant authorities to a company, which then would operate a business in the colony. And the colony would gather these resources and um, send them back to the company, which in turn would give a portion of the profits to the monarch. So it just went round and round, where in this model, the monarch and the company were the two who would benefit from this arrangement. Now, as you read the chapter, you are also going to come across the term capitalism. And although they do seem very similar, and they are very similar, the biggest difference between mercantilism and capitalism is that with mercantilism is creating profits for the monarch, whereas in capitalism is creating profits for the business. Okay? Here's capitalism in Canada. Okay, so I'll read this paragraph here, and then I'll explain the chart that we have. So the early capitalists argued, as modern capitalists do now, that the creation of wealth is good. Many societies, however, qualify that statement. One position is that the creation of wealth is good if the wealth is shared with the disadvantaged in society. Another position is that the creation of wealth should not exploit. Sorry. Another position is that the creation of wealth should not exploit workers or damage the environment. Okay, and that is where governments come in. So here, on one side of the spectrum, we have the position, the belief, the attitude that some people believe that wealth is good, and it is to be shared with everyone in society. Where on the other side of the spectrum, we have people who believe that there should be competition, and people who rise to the top deserve all the wealth as much as they want, and as much as they want, and they don't have to share with anyone else. Okay? So that is where governments come in. So governments have the capability of controlling capitalism, redistributing wealth via taxes, and supporting other values that people hold dear through laws and social programs. In the Voices feature of the previous page, which we didn't do, we're not going to go into detail. They talk about different opinions of capitalism. Okay, so now in Canada, we have three three parts or three components to capitalism. Okay, Canada has both private and public ownership of businesses. You have the right to run a business, but the government runs many businesses such as mail delivery and public transit. Okay, Canada has a relatively free market. You can purchase pretty much what you like, but the government exercises some control. So, for example, by regulating the safety of many products. Canada has open competition in most areas. That means Canada supports the profit motive. If you run a business, you can keep your profits. after you pay your taxes, of course. And so those taxes then are used to run those social programs and help other people. Okay. So this is capitalism in Canada. This is just one model. Different countries will have different models, but this is how it works here in Canada. Capitalism was the driving force and what led to industrialization. Because now companies were competing to try to make as much money as they could for their own benefit and their own profit, they needed to figure out ways to make products faster and make more of it to satisfy the demand. Okay, so we've talked about the Industrial Revolution. You have talked about it in previous years, and this is where we moved from that agriculture and that labor that was going on to working with machines and producing items at greater scales. So um, they were able to produce quicker, but the downside to this was that they could and there was a lot of pollution, and they didn't treat their workers very well. Okay, so there weren't any laws mandating how to the safety control of their workers. Okay, so a shift of a country's major economic activity from agriculture to manufacturing is basically industrialization. Okay, and again, it benefited entrepreneurs and business owners, but the working conditions weren't always the best. They were not mandated to treat them well, so that in some places were treated quite inhumanely. Okay, so here's your assignment for the week. Now for this, again, I encourage you to watch the video on the Silk Road just so that you have a better understanding of it all. Okay. In the 2L, in the assignment area, you will find a reading of the Silk Road. Okay. Now, after the reading, there is a worksheet that goes along with it. Okay. I'm just going to make it a little bit larger here for you to take a look at it. Okay. So for the first part, you're just basically looking for, within the reading, a word that means the same thing as the ones that we have on this column. So you're looking for a synonym. Okay. For part B, you're just answering questions. Okay. Same with here. Okay, so these are fill in the blanks. And then for part B, okay, we're looking at cause and effect. So the cause, the Romans liked silk. Okay, the effect was they traded. They would raise a lot of money just so that they could do these treks and they could buy from the Chinese the silk. Okay, so here in some of them, I'm giving you the effect. You need to tell me what caused this, or if I give you the cause, what was the effect of that? Okay. So with this assignment, what I would like you to do is just open a Google Doc, and you can either set it up in this way where you create a table and then you do your questions, or you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4 and just give me the answers. Okay. And then once you have your Google Doc completed, just upload it onto the assignments section in D2L and you are good to go. Okay. I hope you have a great week, and I will be running a tutorial this week in case anyone needs any help with the assignment or clarification of the notes.